I'm 32 years old, and what I thought was a stable, boring family life just exploded into something out of a psychological thriller. This started 3 weeks ago, but honestly, the pieces have been there for years, I just didn't know how to see them. My dad has always been the quiet, predictable type. Accountant by trade, khaki pants guy, still uses a paper planner and carries a flip phone. He never raised his voice, never missed a bill payment, and until recently, never gave any indication that he was anything but a loyal husband and reliable father. He retired last year at 65, earlier than expected, which surprised us. Mom said he'd been feeling burnt out, and his office had been downsizing anyway. She thought it was a good time to step away and enjoy life. He started going on long walks every morning, picking up random hobbies like metal detecting and home brewing. We joked that he was trying to find treasure before he found a new purpose. Everything seemed fine, until last month, when he went on a golf trip with a few old colleagues from his firm. It was supposed to be a long weekend. He packed light, left Friday morning, and promised to be home by Sunday night. He never came back. At first, we thought maybe he'd extended the trip. He sometimes lost track of time when he was with his buddies. But by Monday afternoon, my mom was panicking. He wasn't answering his phone. He wasn't responding to texts. His car wasn't at the airport or any of the golf courses he said he'd be visiting. By Tuesday morning, we filed a missing person report. The police took it seriously, which I was grateful for. They looked through bank records, pulled security footage from the toll booths and highways, and that's when the first lie surfaced. He never went to any of the places he said he would. Instead of heading north toward the golf course, he'd driven south, 4 hours south, to a town none of us had ever heard of. A small, coastal place known more for its fishing docks than country clubs. We didn't know anyone there. He had no family, no friends, no business connections in that area. At least, that's what we thought, until the police found him. He wasn't missing. He was living with another woman. A woman around my mom's age. In a house he apparently bought 6 months ago. That's where the story gets darker. The police called my mom on a Wednesday morning and told her they'd located my dad. I was in the kitchen with her when she answered, and I could tell immediately from the look on her face that something was wrong. She just stood there, completely silent, holding the phone to her ear, her knuckles white. When she finally hung up, she didn't speak for a full minute, just stared out the window like she was trying to convince herself she'd heard it wrong. And then she whispered, almost like she didn't want to hear herself say it, he was with someone else. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just calmly walked over to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the house deed, our mortgage papers, and started flipping through them like she was looking for some kind of trapdoor she might have missed. I did the only thing I could think of. I called the number the officer left and asked for details. They told me he was safe, that he didn't appear to be in any danger, and that he'd said, very clearly, that he didn't want to be contacted. That's what broke me. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This wasn't an accident or confusion or some memory issue. This was a choice. He'd planned it. He left on purpose. And more than that, he didn't want to come back. I took 2 days off work and drove down to the coastal town where they found him. It wasn't hard to find the address once I asked around. The house was small but tidy, like something out of a retirement magazine. Fresh paint. New shutters. A potted plant with a handwritten welcome sign. I parked across the street and waited. Not because I wanted to confront him, at least, that's what I told myself. I think part of me was still hoping this was all some kind of misunderstanding, some ridiculous mistake that had spiraled out of control. But then the front door opened, and there he was. Wearing shorts. Smiling. Carrying 2 iced coffees. He handed one to a woman who looked like she belonged in a luxury lifestyle blog. Blonde, tan, relaxed. She kissed his cheek. He laughed. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I didn't go up to him. I didn't say a word. I drove straight back home. When I got there, my mom was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by old photo albums. She'd laid them all out, every vacation, every birthday, every Christmas. 40 years of memories. All of them now poisoned with questions. That's when she told me she found a hidden bank account. Not just one, actually. 3. And he'd been siphoning money into them for the last 2 years. Little by little. Transfers so small and infrequent that they'd flown under the radar. We checked his work pension. Gone. Cashed out 6 months ago. Stocks? Sold. Mutual funds? Liquidated. Every asset they'd built together was split, hidden, drained. He didn't just walk away. He dismantled everything behind our backs, piece by piece, while pretending to be the same man we'd known our whole lives. That night, my mom said something that's haunted me since. She said, I don't think your father ever really existed. And the thing is, she might be right. The next few days were a blur of denial, anger, and confusion. My mom stopped answering calls from her sisters. She started sleeping on the couch, fully dressed, as if part of her expected the door to open and my dad to walk in like nothing happened. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop myself from spiraling. I started digging. If he had other accounts, maybe there were other secrets. I knew he wasn't tech-savvy, but I remembered he used to keep a small lockbox in his closet. I found it behind an old stack of tax returns, and thankfully, he hadn't changed the code. It was still my birthday. Inside were passports. Plural. My dad had a second passport under a different name. It wasn't fake, it looked official, government issued. The name was completely different, but the photo was him. A slightly younger version, maybe taken 8 or 9 years ago. And the birth date was off by 2 years. There was also a second driver's license, matching the new name. I checked the address listed. It wasn't the coastal house. It was an apartment in another state, one I had never even heard him mention. I sat there, holding 2 versions of my father in my hands, realizing for the first time that I didn't actually know which one was real. I didn't tell my mom right away. I needed more information, something solid. So I went through his computer. He'd left it behind, like he didn't think we'd ever bother touching it again. That's when I found the folder. It was buried inside another folder labeled golf scores, which is honestly laughable now. Inside were scanned documents, leases, bank statements, even a medical record for a woman named Elaine H. Bowers. The same woman he was living with. She'd been treated for breast cancer 2 years ago, at a private hospital not far from the town where he now lived. According to the paperwork, my father, under his alias, was listed as her emergency contact. There were handwritten notes, grocery lists, flight itineraries. They'd been together for years. I sat there in stunned silence. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't some late-life romance. He'd built an entire second life, a fully functioning alternate reality with another woman, another identity, another home. And somehow, he managed to keep it all hidden while eating dinner at our table every night. The scariest part? He was good at it. Too good. That's when the paranoia started to creep in. If he was capable of this, what else had he hidden? Did my mom really know who she married? Did I? And the biggest question I still couldn't answer. Why? Why go through all this? Why not just divorce my mom like a normal person? Why the deception? Why the 2 identities? Why the secrecy? That night, I confronted my mom with everything. She didn't cry. She just whispered. He always said he hated surprises. But he became the biggest one of all. I didn't sleep that night. The thought of this woman, Elaine, living in a house my father paid for, using money he siphoned from our family, calling him by a name that wasn't his, it made my skin crawl. I needed to see her. Not to confront her, not yet, but to understand who she was and why my dad chose her. So the next morning, I got in my car before sunrise and drove 4 hours back to the coast. I parked 2 blocks away from the house. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. A wicked stepmother? A gold digger? A clueless woman caught in the same web we were? But when she opened the front door to pick up a newspaper, I was stunned. She looked normal. Plain, almost. Short brown hair. Baggy cardigan. She wasn't glamorous or flashy. She looked like someone's aunt. She watered the plants. She picked up trash from the sidewalk. She smiled at a neighbor walking their dog. And then my father came out behind her, carrying a plastic container of orange juice, calling her Ellie. It made me sick. I waited until they both went back inside, and then I walked right up to the door. I didn't knock. I couldn't. I was shaking too hard. So I just stood there. Then turned around and walked away. But I wasn't done. I went to the local library, small, outdated, but quiet. I pulled up public property records. The house was listed under my dad's alias. Purchased 9 months ago. Paid in full. I kept digging. He had a P.O. box, a business license, a local tax ID. He wasn't just living a second life, he was anchoring it. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. A wedding license. Filed 6 weeks ago. Under his fake name. His real birth date, though. And Elaine's. They were engaged. That explained the secrecy. That explained the detachment. That explained why he vanished. He wasn't starting over, he was replacing us. I nearly screamed in the middle of the library. My dad hadn't just left us behind. He was erasing us. I drove home in silence, my mind flipping through every memory like a broken projector. His laugh, his voice, the way he'd call me kiddo after a hard day. All of it felt poisoned now, like it belonged to a character in a story I hadn't realized was fiction. When I got home, my mom was sitting at the dining table, phone in hand, staring at a text. She showed it to me. It was from my dad. One line. "I need you to stop digging. You're going to ruin things." He hadn't spoken to her in nearly 2 weeks. No apology. No explanation. Just that. Like we were the ones disturbing his peace. My mom looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw true fear in her eyes. "What is he capable of?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. But I was starting to think, we didn't know the half of it. For 30 years, I believed my dad was just a boring, safe, beige kind of guy. He wore socks with sandals. He listened to jazz. He fixed broken cabinet doors and printed out directions instead of using GPS. He was a CPA, certified, licensed, and dull. Or so I thought. After he texted my mom to stop digging, something shifted in both of us. We weren't scared anymore. We were angry. I still had access to one of his old work emails. He'd set it up years ago on our home desktop when he was still with a local firm before switching to a private practice. I figured it would be deactivated by now, but surprisingly, it wasn't. Maybe he forgot about it, or maybe he assumed no one would think to check. The inbox was mostly junk. But buried between random newsletters and discount offers, there was a folder labeled Consults. Most of the emails were mundane, clients asking for advice, spreadsheets, tax questions. But then I found one that stood out. A message from a man in South Dakota. It was vague, but clearly marked confidential, and it referenced something called Movement Coordination Services. There was no mention of accounting or finances. It included a transaction record for $9,500, wired to an LLC based in Montana. The subject line was Q2 Logistics/Relocation D. Blackwell. I didn't know what it meant, but it didn't sound like taxes. I googled D. Blackwell, Montana, expecting to find nothing, but instead, I landed on a news article. A man named Daniel Blackwell had been arrested for embezzling funds from a government contract. The charges were dropped after his defense team revealed that crucial financial evidence had gone missing. The state couldn't prove its case. The trial had collapsed. The date of the wire transfer in the email? 2 weeks before the missing evidence was reported. That's when it hit me. My dad had been doing something else. Something far bigger than filing W-2s and tracking 401k contributions. And whatever it was, he was good at keeping it buried. I checked the business license he used in the coastal town. It was filed under Precision Financial Structures, LLC. Harmless sounding. But the listed business category? Consulting and document management. Which could mean anything, or nothing at all. And that alias he used? I found it again in court records. He'd served as a witness in a civil trial 6 years ago. Under the fake name. Gave testimony on consulting work for a transportation project that was later cancelled under mysterious circumstances. No one connected it to his real identity. Because they didn't know who he really was. And neither did we. I brought everything to my mom. She didn't speak. She just sat there with the laptop in front of her, scrolling through emails like she was reading a story about a total stranger. In some ways, I guess she was. We both agreed on one thing. This wasn't just an affair, or a midlife identity crisis. It was a long game. A double life so well maintained, it required years of planning, documentation, and deception. He wasn't a man having an affair, he was a man living in two realities and blending them so seamlessly that no one had noticed. Not even the people closest to him. That night, she said the scariest thing I've ever heard her say. What if he's done things we don't want to know about? And suddenly, I wasn't just worried about money or marriage. I was worried about what else he might be hiding. Because if someone can disappear from one life and slip into another so easily, who's to say he wasn't planning a third? It came in the middle of the night. I was half asleep, scrolling through my inbox out of habit, when I saw it, an anonymous email with no subject line and no sender name. Just an address I didn't recognize. The message read, "You're not the only one he left." That was it. No greeting. No explanation. No signature. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. At first, I thought it might be spam. But the address, buried in random letters and numbers, wasn't flagged by filters. It looked handmade. Deliberate. And there was something about the tone. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a clue. I responded immediately. Just one sentence, "Who are you?" No reply. Not for hours. I barely slept. By morning, I was practically vibrating with anxiety. I checked my email every 10 minutes, expecting nothing. But at 10:43 a.m., a second message arrived. "Meet me at the old train station off Route 14. Thursday, 9 p.m. Come alone. I reread it a dozen times. I felt like I was in a spy movie, and not in a good way. I paced around my apartment, debating whether to go. My mom was still fragile, and I didn't want to drag her deeper into whatever this was becoming. But something in my gut told me I had to go. So I did. That Thursday, I drove out to the old train depot, shut down years ago, now just a skeleton of cracked concrete and faded signage. I parked in the back, hidden behind a row of trees, and waited. At 9:12 p.m., a woman appeared. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Dark coat. Ball cap. She walked with purpose, like she knew the place well. She didn't say hello. Just sat on the bench next to me and pulled out a folder. No small talk. No hesitation. She handed it over and said one thing: "Your dad ruined my life too." I flipped through the pages. Photos. Financial records. Handwritten notes. Letters. Her name was Christine. Turns out she'd been married to a man named Alan Brooks 10 years ago. They met in a city I'd never even heard of. She showed me wedding photos. They had a dog. They bought a house. Then one day, he disappeared without a trace. No goodbye. No forwarding address. Just vanished. Alan Brooks was my dad. Different name. Different town. Different everything. But same man. Same smile. Same gestures. Same handwriting. Christine had been looking for answers ever since. When she saw the recent marriage license for his engagement to Elaine posted in a local paper, she still followed updates from the town she last saw him in. She recognized the man immediately, under yet another name. And that's when she found me. She searched for connections tied to the alias and stumbled across one, my mom's real estate listing, which still had our family name on it. Then my social media. And then she found my email address. Christine wasn't just a bitter ex. She had proof. Documents with my dad's signature, 3 different names, same hand. She had letters he'd written, emails, even a voicemail saved on an old phone. His voice. It was him. And suddenly, the pieces started shifting into something far more sinister. He hadn't just created a second life. He had a pattern. A rotation. Multiple women. Multiple identities. Multiple exits. And the more we talked, the more we realized Christine might not be the only one. There could be more. Dozens, even. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a career. After that night at the train station, I didn't go home. I drove to a 24-hour diner and sat in a corner booth until sunrise, flipping through Christine's folder like it was some cursed artifact. Every page confirmed the same horrifying truth. My father had built multiple lives, one after the next, leaving behind women, homes, entire identities. But Christine had done something I hadn't. She traced the trail backward. She showed me the first name she'd ever found him under, Richard Flynn, tied to a small town in Arizona. No marriage certificate there, but property records and a business license. Same fake profession, consulting. Same pattern of wired money and sudden disappearance. Then there was Michael Rhodes, listed as the managing partner of a small LLC in Oregon. That company dissolved 3 years ago. No legal trouble, but the taxes were filed late, and the address listed was a UPS mailbox. Each life spanned 5 to 7 years. Then he vanished, just as quietly as he arrived. We counted 5 identities in total. Not including the one I knew him as, my dad. The only name I thought was real. I went home the next morning and told my mom everything. I expected her to fall apart, but she just sat there, quiet, staring at the carpet like it was trying to tell her something. Then she stood up and said something I'll never forget. "He's not running to something," she said. "He's running from something." And just like that, the lens shifted. Maybe this wasn't just about lies or infidelity. Maybe this wasn't even about us. Maybe it started before we ever existed. That same day, I went to the police, not to file a report, but to ask if they had anything, on any of the names we now knew. Most of them turned up nothing, clean records, dead ends. But when I mentioned Michael Rhodes, the officer froze. That name had been flagged years ago in connection with a federal investigation. Not for fraud. Not for embezzlement. For witness protection breach. My blood ran cold. I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't even fully understand what it meant. The officer wouldn't give me much, just that someone with that name had been listed as a cooperative asset in a case that never went to trial. Everything else? Sealed. I went home feeling like the ground beneath my life had cracked open. Was he ever an accountant? Was he ever any of the things we believed? Or was he something else entirely, a ghost moving through identities, dropping roots just long enough to blend in, then disappearing before the truth could catch up? Christine called me again that night. She sounded calm, but I could hear the edge in her voice. She'd found another woman. A blog post, titled, "My husband disappeared in 2012, and I think I just saw him again." The photo attached? A man named John Keller. Same face, same eyes, same damn smile. We weren't even close to the bottom of this. This wasn't just a double life. This was a labyrinth. And I was about to step deeper in. I couldn't keep watching from a distance anymore. Elaine, Ellie as my father called her, was the only person left in this mess who seemed to believe he was exactly who he claimed to be. She was still living with him, still planning a wedding, still trusting the version of him he'd so carefully crafted just for her. I had to talk to her. Not to humiliate her. Not to fight. But to warn her. I didn't tell my mom or Christine. I needed to do this alone. I drove down to the coast again, heart pounding the whole way, terrified she'd slam the door in my face, or worse, that he'd be home. I got there around 11 a.m. on a Sunday. Her car was in the driveway. His wasn't. I rang the bell. She answered with a smile. Polite, warm, unsuspecting. I introduced myself by my real name, not as his daughter. I told her I had a personal connection to someone she might know. She looked puzzled but let me in anyway. The inside of the house was spotless, cozy. Photos of her and my father, as his newest persona, smiled from every shelf. I asked her how long they'd known each other. She said 6 years. My stomach flipped. 6 years ago, he was still living with us. I asked about how they met. She said it was in a grief support group. Grief? I froze. She told me he had lost his daughter in a car crash 10 years ago. That he rarely spoke about it, but that it had changed him. That she felt bonded to him instantly, because she'd lost her sister the same way. I didn't even know what to say. My real father had used my death, a fictional, invented tragedy, to manipulate this woman into trusting him. Into loving him. She offered me tea. I declined. Then I told her the truth. That the man she was planning to marry had 5 different identities. That his name wasn't David, or Alan, or Michael. That I wasn't just some stranger with an odd interest in her fiancé, I was his daughter. The one he told her had died. Her face crumbled. She didn't speak for almost a full minute. Then she asked if I had proof. I handed her a folder, copies of photos, records, the wedding license with Christine, the court transcript where he testified under a different name. She took one look and started to shake. She whispered, "No. This can't be real." I told her it was. I told her about my mom, Christine, the blog post from the other woman in 2012. I told her about the sealed court file tied to witness protection. And that I didn't know if he was running from danger, or if he was the danger. She sat down hard, like her legs had stopped working. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there, blinking, as if her entire reality had short-circuited. Then she stood up, walked to a drawer in the kitchen, and pulled out a ring box. Inside was an engagement ring I'd never seen before. He said he wanted to get married quietly, she said softly. Just the two of us. No guests, no paperwork until after. He said it was simpler that way. Safer. Safer. That word echoed in my head. I asked if she knew where he was now. She said he'd left for a client meeting in another state and wouldn't be back until the weekend. I gave her my number. Told her to call me if he came back. If she changed her mind. If she needed help. She didn't say goodbye. She just nodded once, slowly, and closed the door. And as I walked back to my car, I realized something chilling. That house? It looked exactly like ours had when I was growing up. He hadn't just moved on. He'd copied his past and started over with a woman who didn't know better. Elaine didn't call that night. Or the next day. Or the day after that. I tried to tell myself maybe she was processing. Maybe she needed space. But deep down, I was terrified she'd chosen to believe him over me. That he'd come back, spun some masterful lie, and swept her doubts under the rug like he always did. Then, 4 days later, my phone rang. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. But when I picked up, her voice came through, barely more than a whisper. He knows. Those 2 words sent my blood cold. I asked her where she was, if she was safe. She said she was calling from a gas station 5 miles out of town. She sounded shaky, like she'd been crying, or worse, running. Then she said something that made my hands go numb. He told me if anyone ever showed up asking questions about his past, to tell him immediately. That it meant the people who were after him had found him. She thought it was paranoia. Something from his time doing government work, as he called it. She assumed he meant dangerous clients, or debt collectors, or maybe even criminals. But when she told him I had shown up, he didn't panic. He got quiet. Asked her what I said. What I gave her. If I left anything behind. She lied, said I only asked about some missing tax forms. That she hadn't let me in. And that's when things got strange. He packed a bag. Told her to go to her sister's house. That he had to take care of something. Then he burned documents in the backyard. Tax returns. IDs. Envelopes. Elaine said he didn't know she was watching. She waited until he left, grabbed what she could, and fled. And now she was sitting in a gas station bathroom with a duffel bag and a cell phone she'd never used before, just in case he was tracking her. I told her to stay put. She said no. I'm not hiding, she said. But you need to know something. He told me once, if anything ever came out, anything at all, there was a backup plan. That word again. Plan. He said he had a way to disappear completely. No names. No IDs. No trace. That if things got too complicated, he'd vanish. And no one would ever find him again. I asked her what that meant. Where he might go. But she didn't know. He never gave details. Just told her that if the past caught up with him, he was gone for good. And now? He was already in the wind. We agreed she'd come back with me. My mom was terrified but opened the house without hesitation. Elaine stayed in the guest room, barely speaking, sleeping with the light on. I reached out to Christine and the other woman from the blog. And together, we formed a timeline. 6 identities, 4 states, 3 engagements. At least 2 marriages, maybe more. But now, none of us knew where he was. He'd gone underground. Vanished. Just like he promised. And all we had left were fragments of a man who never truly existed. I don't know what compelled me to do it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe desperation. Maybe I just needed to feel like I had control over something. But a week after Elaine moved in, I found myself in the basement of my childhood home, digging through old boxes, yearbooks, Christmas lights, broken appliances. All the stuff we pack away and never look at again. That's where I found the briefcase, tucked behind a stack of yellowed newspapers and an old cooler. It was coated in dust, locked tight. I didn't recognize it. My mom didn't either. I took it upstairs and pried it open with a flathead screwdriver. Inside were files, dozens of them. Not financial records. Not personal photos. But surveillance. Printed maps with locations circled. Notes in his handwriting, about people. Schedules. Routines. Descriptions. A woman named Diane. A man named K. Meyer. A teenager at a bus stop. Some of the pages were stamped. Red ink. Confidential. Government seals, some faded, some crossed out. And then, near the bottom, a file with a name I hadn't heard before. Thomas Wells. That was the first name I could prove was truly his. Not David. Not Alan. Not Michael. Thomas Elijah Wells, born 1955, Kansas City. Military file. Discharged, honorably. Then hired under contract for a federal agency, redacted, of course. Dates matched. So did some of the photos. One small photo, barely the size of a passport square, showed a much younger version of him in front of a plain gray building, arms crossed, expression flat. Behind him, barely legible, a plaque with a government emblem. The man we knew, our dad, our partner, our fiancé, wasn't a tax consultant. He was a shadow. A federal ghost. A man who made people disappear, or maybe disappeared people himself. The aliases? The relocations? The secrecy? All part of the job. But at some point, the job became the life. He blurred the lines. Built new worlds. Slipped into new names like changing clothes. And eventually, maybe he forgot which life was real. Or maybe he just stopped caring. The last document in the case was a letter, never mailed, no return address. It was addressed to me. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. He wrote about regret, about exhaustion, about how the life he built was never meant to last. He said he tried to live a normal life, but that normalcy bored him, burned him. That he always knew he'd have to leave one day. He didn't say sorry. He didn't ask forgiveness. He said one thing that haunts me. You were the closest I ever came to staying. I sat there for a long time after that, holding a letter from a man who had dozens of names, but still signed it, Dad.